Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca for my weekly chatty catch up on everything that I read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading for roughly the current week, as well as some general chit chat. Today I'm slightly having a struggle in getting going. I was out a little bit too late last night, and so we are here though. We have made it. So that is the biggest step, I think. So wrapping up my week from last week, it was a fantastic reading week in terms of finishing things. Some I can talk about and some I cannot talk about. So the stuff I can talk about is just one book, Some Desperate Glory by Emily Tesh. It's a chunky book. This was on my TBR. It is from the Ursula K. Le Guin Prize, as well as the latest Hugo novel winner. And I went in avoiding knowing things. So I will preface this with that. I buddy read this with Tiffany from Towering TBR, and we had a great time buddy reading this. I think this gives a ton to talk about. So this is a great buddy read book, in fact. But I think Tiffany had gone in with a lot of expectations, and her experience was different from mine, I think, because of that, because I had heard such mixed things and that the marketing was kind of wrong on this. So I went with no expectations. And I also don't usually theorize a lot about what's going to happen in books. I just kind of go with it. And here I was trying to figure out, well, where things could possibly go throughout the reading experience. So that wound up being a lot of the buddy read going, what could happen from here? So this story is a science fiction story in a far future, and it is a space opera because there are definitely political and interpersonal conflicts, but it is kind of a personal story, though, about a singular character, Kier. And Kier has grown up within a space colony, more or less, as not even a colony, on a space station, Gaia station. And that sounds very utopian, but this is not very utopian. In fact, this is very much a book about deconstructing from a human supremacist faction cult. So that sounds pretty bleak. This does manage to get into those very dark, harrowing topics without being that bleak. It maintains some hopefulness about the fact that your mind can be changed, but there is a struggle to change your mind. And so this is, I think going into this, you should know you're in for a lot of the internal introspection and grappling that people have to go through to recognize that everything they've been told, the reality, the version of reality that they've been brought up with, is incomplete to the point that it's not so much the truth. The impressions that they have about people or the ways they can live or choose to be in their lives have been intentionally limited for them. And so I think from that aspect, you should also know going in that this is very much both a military and a reproductive dystopia. Kier has grown up in this very isolated society who are out for vengeance for humans over something that happened in their past. And they think that humanity is superior to all others. As I said, it's a very human supremacist cult. And as a result, this reproductive dystopia has occurred. They're very militaristic as well. And so Kier is at the end of her teens facing assignment into some role, and she is sort of a super soldier in many ways, but she's not alone in that. That's everything that every child in her world, her existence, has been crafted for, more or less. They've been specifically chosen and trained their whole lives for this role, to be excellent soldiers for humanity. And if they aren't, then they will be excellent stock, breeding stock for humanity. And it just is such a bleak outlook. And yet she's so hopeful and excited about potentially being assigned into military and having to serve. Like, for her, service to this community is the fruition of everything that her whole life has been. And so naturally, that's the very beginning. And I won't go really into the plot other than to tell you that that's the beginning and that's the premise here. That, of course, that breaks down. And something happens to where her reality is shifted, and she recognizes that everything that she's kind of been told has not been the whole story. And so from there, it very much is the grappling, the individual introspection, the understanding that people can be different, that there are choices to be made, And sometimes those choices are very dire and have rippling effects throughout society, her society, other societies. I think that from a space opera perspective, this did a lot of things that you've seen elsewhere. It brought back many other books, like even Handmaid's Tale, not space opera, or Red Rising. This has elements of things like that, many other books. But I felt like it was combining a lot of those elements in ways that were really interesting and felt pretty fresh to me. I also know a lot of people have felt that the character was on the younger end, or immature, I think. For me, I didn't see that as much. It felt like she was naive because of what she's been through, but I didn't feel that YA vibe to this as much as others have. I would say if you are wary about that going in, maybe avoid the audiobook, because I did read this immersively with both the print and audio, and for me there were so many moments where in print I was reading her as very reserved or even cold, and the audiobook narrator goes pretty much 100% emotion for her character specifically all of the time. Whereas there's another character who is voiced, again, I think both characters are voiced really well, but the other character, there are moments when their emotion is specifically noted in the text, either like exclamation marks or descriptions of their emotion, and that is not carried out by the voice actor. So I felt like she was over emotive in the audio, and it made her come across much more immature and reactive than she is in the text to me. So I think if you're feeling like you aren't going to get along with this because of character immaturity, go with the print for sure. Try it at least. In the end, I really enjoyed this for the sense of plot that was very gripping, and it's separated into parts, and the final part was absolutely page-turning. It was pretty unput-downable at that point. The characters felt very believable, and we do get to know them so well, a wide range of different types of people. The social commentary and politics are tackling so many different topics that are very, very relevant today. So I really enjoyed that. I think that this was such a fantastic and enjoyable story as kind of a standalone science fiction space opera that is expansive while also being very intimate to an individual character. The one thing that I kind of had to knock off points on this for is I didn't find it completely believable that she grapples and she struggles, but at times she kind of accepts a little too quickly things that are overturning everything she has known. So I just couldn't buy in at certain moments that she would have, or other characters as well, would have accepted quite so quickly to change their minds. Because that, I think we all know that deconstructing from any sort of indoctrination is really, really a process. So I feel like that process was shortened a bit here. Necessary for a book this length, I think, but it didn't feel quite real to me. The other is that internal consistency of certain characters didn't feel entirely true. We see people behave a little bit out of character. And because we have gotten to know them very much, like, we do understand their character. And so yeah, those things stood out, but they weren't really major points or anything significant too much. They just felt a little out of place. So that caused me to lower it slightly. But I can absolutely see why this has had award love and quite a bit of hype around book 2, because it is a fantastic novel. I also felt that the acknowledgements were perfect. The acknowledgements at the end of the book, she talks through a reading list of books that she was reading through while writing this on the topic of fascism and cults, nonfiction, not fiction. And then her final acknowledgement, appropriately, was Ursula K. Le Guin. So even at the time she was writing this, she saw the hand of Le Guin in influencing her on writing social commentary science fiction. And that's just perfect now that she's up for the Le Guin Prize. This was a really, really great book. I would say I found this very, very hopeful and optimistic about the topic that is quite difficult, but also be aware and read the content warnings at the beginning if you have any concerns about content whatsoever, because it is also a very bleak and difficult topic to go into. It was a lot to process through. So yeah, fantastic read. And that is all I can talk about for this week. So I also finished book number 3 and 4 of the BookTube Prize readings and have moved on to book 5. So I guess that's where I'm at in my currently reading update. I'm into book 5 of the BookTube Prize reading out of 6. So that's fantastic. Like we're actually looking like I'm good for finishing in time. And I also started on audio What Feasts at Night by T. Kingfisher for my first B season. And it is the second in the Alex Easton series. And then I am back a bit. I read a little bit of Mossflower by Brian Jacks. So I think that's all for reading. In watching updates, so back to my 2 BookTube Prize reads that I finished this week. Both of them are set in Ireland, or majorly in Ireland, prominently. And by somewhat random chance, I finally decided to get to Derry Girls. I have not watched any of it, but I of course know of it, and I've loved Nicola Coughlan elsewhere, so I definitely wanted to get to it. And I finally started it and blazed through it, and it's gone now. I'm so sad. I can't believe there are only 3 seasons. For some reason, I thought it was going to be this like super long running show, and it's not. It just disappeared before my eyes as I was watching it. But it's so good. It's such a wonderful commentary on life in Ireland through this very, very difficult time in recent history. And the normal day-to-day with that as a backdrop, the conflicts there going on, as basically just being teenage schoolgirls, like them going through the normal teenage schoolgirl stuff with the backdrop of constant conflict and fear. And that was just such a great way of exploring that story. And so I'm not going to talk about my BookTube Prize books, but it was very appropriate tie-in to 2 modern day set Irish books. So the other thing that I watched, and of course I loved it. I thought it was really fantastic, and Nicola Coughlan was of course the standout throughout. Who else was a big, I kind of liked James, but I think really Nicola Coughlan was the big win there. The other thing that I finished was Umbrella Academy, the final season. And I kind of want to go back and reread everything and rewatch everything from Umbrella Academy. It's one of my favorite comics. I love Umbrella Academy. Love Gerard Way. He's a creative genius as far as I'm concerned. And this tied in a bit, like some of the science fiction-y elements tied in significantly with this, but I can't really talk about it without going spoilery. And I think they were better done in Umbrella Academy, in fact. So that was hard because I was very much holding the 2 up against each other. However, Umbrella Academy really delivered. I felt like it was such a wonderful and very fitting end to the series. And yeah, it was really a beautiful show. They did kind of steal a couple things, like a couple of individual plot elements had come from other things that I've seen, like very, very closely. I also adore that we got Nick Offerman and Megan Mullally as Jean and Jean Thibodeau. They were so quirky and strange and unsettling and very, very funny through the entire season. I'm glad they were kind of major players this season, and like great pair to have on board in the show. They were very, very fitting. Yeah, I think that is all for the watching updates. Lifey updates. Oh man, so the weather. Today, the air conditioning has not come on at all. It has cooled down enough that it's just slightly below, or overnight it cooled down enough that it has stayed below AC temperature. We will be back up into the 90s later this week, but for today, I'm really enjoying it. I also got out and did some like little vendor-y shopping with a friend last weekend and got some cute things. So I don't normally like share that, but everybody liked all the stuff I shared last time. So I'm going to share my cute, goofy, not particularly useful stuff. So I got more towels. Not that I needed them, but I kind of wanted more of these like flower cloth towels. So I got mushroom towels, very cute. I'm super happy with that one. And then perfect as we were heading into fall season, some cute ghosties. I adore that one too. And then I got a card just because it was very pretty. So I don't know how well it will come through here, but this is actually a photo of flowers and foliage rather than a painting or anything. So this artist collects these things and photographs them into these art pieces and then returns them outside to do what they're meant to do outside as needed. So this is from Bee in the Bucket. And finally, I got some strawberry champagne tea, loose leaf tea from Cup and Kettle. So this looks like it's going to be very good, and it feels like it'll be a very fall morning-y tea, I think. I have been out and about a little bit more this weekend, really. As I said, I was out a little late last night. Nothing super interesting or of note, but my energy levels seem to be going up. And that feels good because my energy had been kind of through the floor the past couple months. Primarily, I think, due to stress. But so it's feeling good and perfectly timed with hopefully fall. We will see if the weather cooperates because, as I said, it's going to be fairly warm, certainly the next several days, but we're getting bursts of near fall weather. So if the fall times with my having energy and things actually going on outside, that will be ideal. So I think that's it for me for this week. And I have one recommendation to give you for the week that I saw, and that was a great video from Books and Cooks about a list of reproductive rights themed books and films. I highly recommend checking that out, and it was perfectly timed. Again, a nice coincidence that this coincided with a couple of my BookTube Prize books that I was reading, topics covered in them, and also, of course, I was reading a reproductive dystopia. So yeah, very fitting. So go check that video out for sure. I think that's all for me today. So I hope you are having a wonderful week as always, and thank you so very much for watching.